hour long. We know that some of you are on your lunch. If you do have to sign off, no worries. It will be available afterwards. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Cornelia and Allison. Thank you so much for being here.
Cornelia, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock my time, Arizona. So I'm Cornelia Perry. I'm the Tribal Program Specialist for the National Missing and Unidentified Person System, NamUs for short. I'm Navajo, Tuaheadlini Nishlit Tachini Bashichin Lashe Dashichedo Twitzoni Dashinal. No, that's wrong. Twitzoni Dashinal. But anyways, I'm from Lukajugai, Arizona. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, auntie, sister, and I live in Lukajugai, Arizona. I work remote from there. And I'm also a retired law enforcement. I was a criminal investigator for 18 and a half years with the Navajo Nation. I worked as a criminal investigator in the Chinle district. So the Navajo Nation has 7 districts, and I worked out of the Chinle district. Not only was I a criminal investigator, I was also a coroner for the Navajo Nation and investigated all death cases that came into the Chinle district from the time that they're found to the time of writing out death certificates. So I also worked missing person cases, and in 2007, I found NamUs at a training. Um, so as law enforcement working for the Navajo Nation, I was always told that we didn't have any funding for training, and so I had to look for free training. So I found a free training and I went to this free training, and that's where I found NamUs. And back in 2007, Navajo Nation didn't have an accurate number of missing persons on the Navajo Nation. So NamUs was free. They told me it was free. So I wanted to try it out. And so I brought it back to Chinle District, and then I started using it. I really didn't know how to use it from the beginning. I just kind of played around with it, looked into a lot of the drop down fields and stuff like that, and then just went on into it. And then when I did get a missing persons, I would sit down with family members. I actually sit down with them, and then I would go into every field that NamUs had, drop down fields. I would ask those questions. I would ask them, like, for instance, all the name, um, all the information, address, and where they were last seen, their clothing description, everything that NamUs has in there. I would ask them, including like medical information. Were they missing with their vehicle? Did they have a cell phone, checking account, banking account, any type of media, like for instance, did they have Facebook and stuff like that? So I would ask those questions directly to the family member who was reporting their loved one missing. And so that's where I started out from. So from 2007 all the way until I retired in 2022, I used NamUs. And um, like I said, Navajo Nation didn't have a missing person. So I went to the other districts and I started collecting or updating their information. And I tried to update all the information in other districts, but it was overwhelming. So um, I wasn't able to finish with that. And in 2022, I was offered this position as a tribal liaison or a tribal program specialist for NamUs, and I accepted it. And now I work for NamUs, and my main focus is to get NamUs out there, to advocate for NamUs and to register and train tribal law enforcement, not just in my area, not just the Navajo Nation, and not just Arizona, but all the states in the United States. including Alaska. So, and then we were very, very, very fortunate and thankful that we went to Alaska a few weeks ago. I mean, that was like a big check mark off my list, even I mean, just personally too. And so I'm here for the people. I'm here for law enforcement. I'm here for advocates. If you have any questions, our information will be coming up later on in the slides. So go ahead, Allison.
Thank you, Cornelia, for that amazing introduction, not only about yourself, but about the program and just how you found it and all that you've done. And I just want to point out that even though you said it was overwhelming in your previous position to go to all the districts, that's something that you never forgot. And in your NamUs position, you've still kept that relationship and been integral in getting Navajo Nation's cases in NamUs and keeping them updated and working very closely with their missing persons team. So I just wanted to point that out, that you've stuck with it. So hi everyone, I'm Allison O'Neill, and I am NamUs cold case advisor. I wear a lot of hats. I team up with Cornelia for all of our tribal outreach. And because though she is Superwoman, it is not something one can do alone. This country is a big place. And so we've been able to do twice as much. We do things together like this. We also do separate outreach and travel to try to say yes as many times as we can. So I've been with NamUs for several years. I started actually in the world of missing and unidentified persons in 1999. I worked about 20 years for the Orange County Sheriff Coroner in Southern California. I was born and raised in Southern California. I'm still here and work remotely from home. And I was a coroner investigator and supervising investigator there. I was very fortunate that the person in charge of the long-term unidentified deceased in our county took me under his wing. And when he retired, I was able to take care of those cases. And I did so like they were my own family. And even though I left in about 2018 to come to NamUs, I too never forgot those cases and have still been able to take care of them and support from this role as well. So that's been very special. We're going to get into the presentation. We have this lunchtime today with you, and we'll talk about as much as we can. And then, as Cornelia said, we're always available to talk offline later on. I'm going to run the slides, and then Cornelia and I are going to go back and forth on some of the on the slides. And I just want to, because NamUs is a federal justice program, I do need to say the standard disclaimer that though it is under the National Institute of Justice Office of Justice Programs, the opinions and information expressed today are not necessarily reflective of the federal government, and they are coming from myself and Cornelia. So just, I know many of you are familiar, but for those who need a refresher or are not as familiar, maybe you're newer to your role in advocacy, the nation's silent mass disaster is a term that's been coined. It's used pretty universally for the large number of missing and unidentified persons nationwide. And this, though the numbers fluctuate, especially for missing persons, you can count on basically it being 600,000 individuals go missing every year. Many of those come back on their own, are located based on good work of all different types of professional roles and families. But there are obviously those who continue to be missing and become long-term missing persons. For unidentified bodies, that number is a little bit easier to track as long as agencies report their numbers, which is challenging in some areas. But there's about 4,500 unidentified deceased that are recovered every year. Again, many of those are being identified through the good work of those coroners and medical examiners and are not there. However, I would say there's about 1,000 that are carried over from year to year that we're adding on. The number again is a little hard to quantify because though we're taking 1,000, forward every year, a lot of that 4,400 are being identified. So anyway, that's where we're at. So the nation's silent mass disaster. A lot of people don't talk about it, don't know about it, but there's a lot of families out there with unending grief who and the professionals that support them that are very acutely aware. So in the early 2000s, a few years before Cornelia found NamUs, NamUs was born, again, a federal program born out of the need that they saw nationwide to fill gaps in services, all kinds of services, including forensic services for missing and unidentified persons. And so they created a national database that's a central repository to store, share, and compare missing and unidentified persons. They created free forensic services and forensic providers to fill gaps. At that time, if you can remember back to the early 2000s, a lot of the gaps were in DNA services and funding for DNA. So that was a lot of it. But also, depending on where you are in the country, not everybody has board certified forensic dentists and fingerprint examiners and anthropologists. And so the program has all of that. And we'll get into some, show you a little bit how this works and talk about some cases that have been solved or are being worked with the NamUs program. So the government basically combined all of those services and technology to support all those cases. Now, as time has gone on, I would say at the beginning, there were 0 states with legislation mandating NamUs usage. So it definitely, though free and accessible to everyone, it was not, it was only utilized by people who knew about it and had the desire to use it. So it was voluntary. Now, there are some states, as you can see, not a lot, but some states that have mandated NamUs usage for either missing, unidentified, or both cases. And that's indicated by the light blue on the map is states requiring for missing person cases to be entered into NamUs, and the dark blue is both missing and unidentified. So for Alaska, as mentioned, there's a requirement for entering the missing person cases. Currently, that is being done and in compliance with the Alaska legislation by the Alaska State Troopers Missing Persons Unit in the State Clearinghouse. That doesn't mean local law enforcement agencies can't enter. It's just definitely being done at the state trooper level to make sure that it's being done. But it can be done by tribal law enforcement, non-tribal local law enforcement. But I am super impressed that and not surprised that Alaska passed this legislation and is in compliance. It's wonderful to see the assistance going to these cases. So, as Cornelia mentioned, NamUs continues to be free for everyone. We'll talk about how families and advocates can use it, as well as law enforcement and coroners, but it's free for all of the groups who use NamUs. It is secure as can be from hackers. The federal government has very tight security. In fact, so tight that it can be a little bit frustrating to even create an account or to change your password every few months. So it's, you know, but it is what that's the world we live in right now. And then it is available nationwide. So this is for all cases in the United States or US territories, as well as our service members who are abroad and have unfortunately gone missing, either in battle or during routine deployments. And then also for foreign nationals who are in the United States visiting or living and they go missing, they are also eligible to go into NamUs as well. So just really quick, who uses NamUs? I mentioned that it can be used by anyone. You can see there some of the statistics in terms of 40,000 family members and victims advocates are using the database. That is our strongest, most powerful group of people who make, I think, the biggest difference in the cases. And then on top, you have the law enforcement, medical examiners who utilize the database. And we also need them too. It all works together. And you'll kind of, I think it's a bit overwhelming to hear about it and kind of not quite grasp how it all works, but hopefully by the end of the presentation, you'll see. And we'd be happy to meet with anybody offline to, do a little demonstration or work through some questions with you. So again, you just have to, I just want to put it in perspective. The database, again, is voluntary, with some states having legislation. So it is not comprehensive of all missing and unidentified persons in the United States. On the screen are the numbers in our database currently. They are large numbers, but sadly, this is not even the total that exist in that silent mass disaster. So if we break the cases down further, if we can search by, and before I get say what I was going to say, I just want to remind you of that old adage about, good data in, good data out, garbage in, garbage out. So some of the statistics I'm going to talk about, they're because people are entering good data, but there's also people who maybe have not entered complete data, or we don't know the information. So just keep that in mind as I'm giving you the best statistics I can from the database, but I may not have all of the most up-to-date information on the cases. So
Allison?
yeah.
Okay, the previous screen. So NamUs has three categories that it has in the system. We have the missing persons, and then we have the unidentified, and then the unclaimed persons. Those are the three categories that NamUs stores. Just wanted to add that.
Yes, thank you so much. And that you reminded me that I didn't talk about the definition of the unclaimed persons. We're not going to be discussing those cases today during this webinar, but unclaimed are people who have died and have their name back, so they are positively identified, but the coroner or medical examiner or law enforcement who has jurisdiction to take care of their body is not able to locate the next of kin. And if they've exhausted their resources, they can then enter that deceased, their information, their name, and some basic pieces of information into the NamUs unclaimed database, in hopes that their family is looking for them, maybe by doing a Google search on the internet, and then that family can link to the agency. And we've had a lot of great success with that as well. And that's, people are very thankful for that database. So of the active cases in our database today, I pulled these numbers today. There's almost 2,800 or 26,000 active cases in the NamUs database for missing persons. And of those cases, from the data that we know that we've been given, the cases that are marked as known American Indian or Alaskan Native individuals who are missing is 907. Of the 907, 9% have been marked as foul play indicated. 32% have of those 907, we know their tribal enrollment or affiliation, and 25% of the 907 are missing from tribal land, and 17% their primary residence where they lived was on tribal land. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they went missing from tribal land, it's just where they lived. And again, information only as good as what we've been told, and we're always actively working to increase our knowledge of cases so that we can provide the best resources and assistance. On the unidentified side of the coin, there's about 15,500 active unidentified person cases in the database. 13% are known homicides. Of those 15,500 cases, 261 are known to be American Indian or Alaskan Native, or I'm sorry, not known, but suspected based on anthropological examinations, possibly items and articles of clothing and accessories, or their 22% were found on tribal land. So again, I think this is an area where anthropologists are doing better than they used to, but this is not a perfect number, or there's not a perfect way to know if someone is American Indian or Alaskan Native. And so I think that's why we're seeing those low numbers. There's a lot of work being done in the anthropology world to talk about how to better identify all different groups in terms of race, culture, ethnicity. Are they a missing migrant who died during a crossing through non-traditional borders? So there's a lot of examples, but I think this is definitely a space that needs improvement, but I'm hearing a lot of talk of improvement. And I'll turn things over to Cornelia. She's going to talk about an open case in NamUs and show you a little bit about what the database can tell you.
So LMA Begay, she went missing in 2021. It's been 4 years since she went missing from a place called Sweetwater, Arizona, not too far from where I live, just over the mountain. And so she went missing with her vehicle. And like we're saying that we do help law enforcement, we do help families, and to enter some of the information that are not entered. Like for instance, in LMA's case, she went missing and she wasn't put into NamUs until I don't remember when she was put into NamUs, but I did talk to the lead investigator, and I also spoke to a family member, and the family member contacted me regarding some of the information that needed to be updated and some more information to be entered into NamUs. And so Allison and we made those corrections and we made those additions in this case. So she is still missing, and her vehicle is also. Go ahead, Allison.
You can see too, I just wanted to point out on the right is an example of a poster that can be generated once NamUs an entry is made. And you were looking, the date she was actually entered into NamUs 3 days after she went missing, which is pretty, which is pretty quick, which is great to get the word out and try to bring tips in. And sadly, LMA has not been located, as Cornelia said, but on the right, you can see a poster that's generated from the NamUs entry. a family is able to print those posters out. Law enforcement can print those posters if they don't have a system that does that. And that QR code takes them to the NamUs entry. The law enforcement information is there, which is much safer than a lot of families will put their own personal contact information. We really advise against that because there's a lot of fraud that's going on, sadly, and families of the missing are being traumatized and victimized again by these fraudsters, saying, I have your missing loved one, send me money, calling in fake tips, all of that. And so, it doesn't matter to us what posters are used, but we just recommend that you always have families not, or recommend families do not list their personal information. So, you know, it doesn't have to be law enforcement. It can be like a general tip line, a general email that maybe, you know, is monitored by those a little bit removed from the situation, so the emotions aren't as much in play, and someone's able to tell the family, wait, let's have law enforcement vet this and be real cautious. And then I just wanted to call attention, I snipped a couple areas of the database from LMA's case below that we're looking at. And so when someone's missing person is entered into NamUs, if the family or an advocate enters, law enforcement who is related to that case does have to verify that they are missing. So nobody can enter their neighbor they're in a feud with, or, you know, a family member that, you know, isn't truly missing and maybe just doesn't want to be found, or, you know, doesn't want contact with their other relative, something, you know, there's those situations where they're not truly missing. And so law enforcement has to verify. There has to be a law enforcement case number associated with the missing person. And the law enforcement needs to approve posting on NamUs's public facing database. More than most of the time, law enforcement is very supportive. And in fact, many law enforcement agencies do the NamUs entries themselves. However, we just have that in place, those checks and balances, to make sure in a suspicious homicide case, you know, that we're not releasing information inadvertently that, you know, is holdback information that law enforcement was using to locate the suspect or to interview the suspect, or something. We don't want something to be out that's going to jeopardize justice being served in that case down the line in court. So, so law enforcement, you know, gets to read the circumstances that family put or an advocate put. You can see where it says that LMA is American Indian. She's enrolled in a tribe with Navajo Nation. So that's an example of what our database looks like there. And then Cornelia mentioned her truck is still missing, so we like to always just get her pictures out. And the FBI supports Navajo Nation missing person cases, and on the right you're seeing an FBI generated poster for LMA Begay. And
So-
Cornelia, I'll turn things over to you again. And just a quick note, this case, NamUs is not trying to take credit for Christine's identification, but Cornelia is going to explain how that came to be. But she's a really good example of DNA and why family DNA is so important in a missing person case.
Okay, Christine Lester, she was Navajo, and she lived in Delcon, Arizona. Delcon is one of the 7 districts for Navajo Nation. She was last seen, or the last contact she made with family was on May 5th in 1987. She said she was going to go to Flagstaff, and she left, and then she was not seen again after that by family members, and she made no contact with family. So 5 days after she went, was a crash in the state of California, and there was a Jane Doe. and they didn't know who she was. They didn't know, she didn't have no identification, and so they didn't know who to contact, and they buried her remains in California. And so here in Delcon, her family tried to look for her, and nothing. She wasn't seen or heard from again. And there was a cold case investigator in California that reopened the Jane Doe case, and um, the coroners also submitted information on the Jane Doe in California, and the cold case investigator did an exhume of the body or the remains, and got the or sent in the DNA from there, and submitted it to the lab. And in the meantime, the family members here on Navajo Nation, they got the family reference sample. The investigator actually got the family reference sample from the family members and submitted it. And that was put into CODIS, and there was a hit in 2023, and she was positively identified, and her remains were brought back to the Navajo Nation. And that's kind of like an example of, if a person goes missing in one area or one state, they could end up in another state, like far away. This is an example that she wasn't found in Arizona, she was found in California. And with the information being put in from law enforcement, and then the information being put in by the medical investigator and the coroner, and then plus getting the family reference samples from family, and we could identify a lot of the Jane Does and the John Does, but that will only work if all the law enforcement and medical investigators and coroners did their part in putting information into the system. So that was Christine Lester. She was identified. Her remains were identified, and her family were able to get a small closure. The case is a homicide case, so I don't think the homicide case was solved.
Thank you, Cornelia. And just to define one term you heard, if you're not familiar with CODIS, that is the combined DNA index system that the FBI manages. It's a very secure system. It's used for different things related to, or different DNA, but in terms, when we're talking about CODIS with missing and unidentified persons, we're just talking about it in relation to identification of those missing and unidentified persons. So when family is submitting DNA to law enforcement and it goes into CODIS, and there was this cold hit, so to speak, where the missing person's DNA was matching to the unidentified DNA, that has zero relation to any arrests, criminal databases, sexual offenders, anything that's criminal is unrelated to missing and unidentified person identifications. And I'll talk about DNA a little bit more in the presentation, but I just wanted to talk about what CODIS is. And so NamUs does not store DNA. We don't have a facility where we store DNA. DNA is all taken care of by a handful of laboratories in the United States who all are accredited and follow these CODIS guidelines. And so we'll touch on that a little bit more. Just really quickly, we talked about 3 databases in one. We've already covered this information. This is what it looks like. I just wanted to show you so that you know you're in the right place if you're going to NamUs. Our website thank you is in the chat. You can also go to namus.gov, namus.gov, and it will redirect to the longer NIJ OJP site. When you go to that site and you click on register, or log in if you already have a login, but if you click on register, you get this screen and it's asking you, are you a public user or a professional user? And if you're a professional user, what is your role? So professional is for law enforcement, coroners, and medical examiners. Public is everyone else. So all of our other professionals in the advocacy spaces, medical spaces, anything, and families of the missing. It's going to ask you for your login, your email, your favorite, food, or your, first animal's name, all the standard stuff. Your contact information can certainly be your work information. You don't need to provide your personal home address. It's whatever you want, but the contact information is always private. So that's not shown to others who are using the database. That's just part of our security, that you have to be a real person using the database. If you're a law enforcement or coroner agency, where do you work? Those persons need a sponsor to show that they need the sensitive information in the database for their work. And then you have to review our privacy policy terms of use and approve that you will abide by those. So it talks about, being very careful and sensitive with the information, who you can and can't share it with, all those kinds of things. So I mentioned a missing person can be entered by anyone. So anyone can create a login. So let's talk about a family of a missing person. The missing person's mother can create a public user account. She can then enter her missing child into the database. I would always recommend, if we have anyone coming to the NamUs team, to you regarding a missing loved one, the very first piece of advice or question is, did you file a missing persons report with law enforcement? And if they say no, you need to hold their hand and walk them through that process, whether that's telephone, in person, etc. But I know for a lot of people that is scary for various reasons. There's mistrust, but the report is important because there are law enforcement communication systems that have different outreach, and then NamUs, a lot of things work together, but it's, nothing's perfect. And that law enforcement system and law enforcement responses, especially if the missing person has newly gone missing, need to be in a timely manner. NamUs was set up as a tool in a toolbox for people. We're not first responders. We are not investigators. Though many of us have that background, we are assisting and augmenting the systems that are in place. So again, back to my example, missing person's mother is entering the case. That's fine. Our team will then review that case. And in a moment, I'll talk about what those next steps are. If you are wondering, when a case should go into NamUs, if we're talking about Alaska, your legislation says, is it 60 days? I believe. And so that's, when the case should be entered within the first 60 days. Other states have different requirements. And when in doubt, when there's no state legislation, we say that within 180 days is usually when local and state resources are exhausted, and that agencies or families should start looking, for other federal resources. So when you log in, this is what your dashboard looks like. You can enter a case by clicking plus missing case, which is add missing case. For those who maybe aren't entering a case, but you're looking up a family mention to you that their loved one is in NamUs and you want to verify that and see if there's any information that maybe you know that could be added or you could suggest to be updated. So you can do a quick search on the left-hand side by putting a name or a state or a county or all of them and clicking search, and then your results will come up. So Cornelia mentioned earlier, a lot of the things when she's sitting down with a family, she's encouraging them to enter as much as possible because they're, we want the system, the algorithms to work as best as possible. So lots of biometrics, scars, marks, and tattoos, anything that's unique, that's best. And we talked about tribal affiliation. What else? Where their residence is, if their residence is on tribal land, we want to know all of that. The federal government gives NamUs separate funding for American Indian, Alaskan Native missing and unidentified person cases, and this helps us, provide resources to where they're needed, especially for forensic services. So once the case is in there, someone can submit the case, which goes to the NamUs team. They are doing those checks and balances to make sure the information is all there. They'll contact the family if they're missing things. They especially will ask the family about law enforcement. That law enforcement information is recorded under contacts. I want to call attention to this tab. When an entry is done, you can include the photo of the missing person. Generally, family is not going to have tattoos, dental records, but they might have pictures of tattoos, unusual jewelry, clothing the missing person was last wearing. These are all very, very important because the NamUs database is shared far and wide on Facebook, other social media platforms, and or a lot of people looking at the database itself, calling or emailing tips saying, I think I saw this person, and giving information about that. And those tips are either going to NamUs, then on to law enforcement, or directly to law enforcement since their information is in the case. Also, how that's helping, besides direct tips, the NamUs algorithms have gives law enforcement and coroners possible matches and of cases that they need to look at. And also, I'll get into the forensics in just one second. But anyway, this information is important, but I want to call attention to those gold shield symbols that are kind of small, but hopefully you can see them with the fingerprints and the dentals. That means they are hidden from public view. So any personal information, PII, medical diagnoses, drug use, etc., all the way to your fingerprints, whether or not DNA was submitted, or your dental records is all private. That is only seen by a smaller group of people to be able to work those forensic cases. So how that is populated is the family may start a record, or law enforcement might start a record, and then the NamUs team works with them to enhance by obtaining those additional biometrics. This is just a larger view of the biometrics. The unidentified person case, absence of any law or legislation, we recommend within 60 days of entry. The information entered is very similar. This is just a quick example of how that specific information given can help. On the bottom, you see the family of the missing person talks about their loved one having a traumatic accident on a moped, being hit by an SUV a few months before their disappearance. On the top, you have the same section of the database from an unidentified person where the medical examiner has entered very similar information about this evidence of a halo fixation device and healed fractures and possible broken spine and neck. So these two agencies, one of these agencies noticed a opposing case, they were able to get together and talk and proceed to find additional commonalities and then compared their cases' dental records for positive identification. The family was able to know what happened to their loved one, and be able to make proper disposition of the remains. The specific information can also be searched under advanced searching to find those possible matches. So if you have somebody who, for example, one time I investigated a case when I was at the county coroner. I had someone who was hit by a car and she died. She wore a ring of human hair, which is very unusual. I investigated, many cases, none but this particular case wore a ring of human hair, and I used that as a search tool. I did not identify her because of her ring of human hair, but just you can see how that unusual piece of jewelry that was handmade could have been a search item for her if someone else had entered the same data. So, so then the advanced searching gives you a list of possible matches that can be exported into an Excel spreadsheet. So a lot of investigators will utilize this to help them when they've exhausted leads. They can use this to keep working and fighting for that case. And maybe they're not out on the streets because they've exhausted all of that, but they can be in their office looking at cases from around the nation that could possibly be their missing person or be their unidentified deceased. Once a case is located, so a missing person has been located, dead or alive, or the unidentified deceased has been identified, then the case is archived in NamUs, which means it's no longer on our public-facing website. And then the agency of record who has jurisdiction then proceeds with next of kin notification, or whatever the steps that they take are, but NamUs steps out at that point when when our website or our forensic services have assisted, then we will close that out and the agency continues with the family. So that's just what that looks like. Really quickly about some forensic services, I want to leave some time. We might go just a little bit over with the Q&A, and that's okay. And for those who have to log off at that point, completely understand that, and you can always catch the recording for the additional Q&A time. Fingerprint services. This is the single most successful thing besides our database helping with resolutions to these difficult cases. Fingerprint services. I actually wrote it down because I wanted to get today's numbers on my pad. Since 2017, when NamUs began a new partnership with the FBI's fingerprint unit, their next generation identification, using their next generation identification or NGI technology, we've identified 752 unidentified persons nationwide, 752 since 2017. This is remarkable, and this isn't we're not, it's not all NamUs. This is all the agencies who submitted fingerprints. This is the FBI. This is the families who told us where their loved one had fingerprints on file. And so that's just super exciting. So everyone talks about DNA, but I still love to talk about fingerprints because it's quick and easy and accessible if someone has been printed civilly, criminally, or for a driver's license in the few states that print for drivers. The FBI is starting to assist with tattoo image recognition. So tattoo recognition. So we're searching those tattoos to try to identify an individual. NamUs augments with forensic odontology or forensic dentist services for agencies who need that. So this is comparing a missing person's dental records from when they were alive and getting dental work done from their dentist to unidentified deceased post-mortem dental records from the coroner or medical examiner. This is a success that happened because of dentals. There was a 20-year-old man who was enrolled with the Navajo Nation tribe who went missing in 1974, a long time ago. And the Air Force, he was actually a service member, and the Air Force Office of Special Investigations entered the case into NamUs in 2016 when they became aware of NamUs services. And so hold that knowledge to your left side right now. And then over on the right, let's say we have some identified remains that were located in 1982 in Lewis and Clark County, Montana. So that county found out about NamUs services, and they had exhausted, of course, between 82 and 2014, they exhausted their resources and entered into NamUs at that point, looking for some additional assistance and hoping that some tips come in to help their case. So indeed, a tip did come in that this man could be the case from Lewis and Clark County, and both cases thankfully had dental records. The dental records were compared, and he was given his name back, and his family was able to know what happened with him. NamUs does have anthropology services to augment for agencies who don't have that. We have DNA services, again, for agencies or states who don't have that. Mostly, it's not agency specific. Some counties have DNA labs, but mostly it's at a state lab or like state patrol, state police. Sometimes they're not related to law enforcement. They could be private labs who do this type of work, who have the specialized training that the FBI requires for CODIS entry that we talked about. And so NamUs does assist with a lot of just supporting courtesy collections. So families who wish to give DNA to help identify their missing loved one, but maybe they've tried everything else, it seems, and this is the last step. They're not quite sure what to do, or they don't want to talk to law enforcement about it. NamUs can walk them through that and hold hands to get that done. It does need to be collected by a law enforcement officer, but we can make that as process as painless as possible. And again, the DNA is only being searched against, for families of the missing, the DNA is only being searched against the unidentified deceased in that database. And there's a special folder for missing and unidentified persons. If you can imagine a file folder for those case types, they are being searched against each other. And the family, the rules are very specific. And in my entire career and in Cornelia's career, we've talked about this. We've never, ever seen the rules being broken on this. The family has to verbally and consent in writing. They have to know that they are giving a cheek swab of their cells and that those are being compared against unidentified persons to hopefully locate their missing loved one. So the family has to be in a place where they think that's a possibility, or will acknowledge that. They, again, verbally and in writing consent. They have to identify themselves with their identification so that we know it is indeed the family of that missing person. And the paperwork that they sign, the consent paperwork, Data for Indigenous Justice, sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied after an hour. They have the consent form or the one that's commonly used and that has that language on there. If you want to see what that looks like, it's also on our website. So very important to have that information to be able to relate to families accurately about what DNA looks like and where it's going. I wish I had more recent numbers, and I'm sorry I didn't have time to grab those, but DNA, it's not perfect. And that's why I really promote fingerprints and dental records. We've had 6 identifications, at least, you know, in 2023. I'm sorry that I don't have 2024 or 2025, but in 2023, we identified 6 persons with DNA. Now you think that's not a lot out of 440 requests, but that's 6 families who got answers. And if it's only one, it was worth it. However, there's varying reasons why DNA doesn't match. It could be due to degradation of the unidentified person, based on weather, water, fire, different things, you know, maybe the killer unfortunately did. And so sometimes, you know, labs are just not able to get those robust profiles that are needed to match. And so there's, we could talk all day about DNA, but it's important and families should do it, but we shouldn't forget about those other biometric possibilities with fingerprints and dentals. Forensic genetic genealogy, everyone's, you know, heard a lot about this, especially on podcasts. I know I have. You hear a lot about the Golden State Killer in California and how he was located with genetic genealogy. That's true. That is, you know, a lot of rapists and murderers are being located with genetic genealogy. We're talking about it only in the sense of identifying unidentified deceased. And so if agencies want to go that route and ask NamUs for funding, they can do that on their unidentified deceased to try to locate. And the reason that's helpful is because a lot of cases, especially older cases, don't have family reference samples, family DNA. They don't have direct reference samples from the missing person. Maybe the family declined to give DNA, all sorts of reasons. So genetic genealogy is helpful. It's time consuming and it is costly. And so we don't have unlimited funding. No one does for that. And so just some notes about that. Daisy Mae Heath she was a young woman who went missing on the Yakima Reservation and was ultimately identified by forensic genetic genealogy. She had a maternal half sibling, and that was not a strong enough sample to match to the unidentified skeletal remains. And so forensic genetic genealogy was what solved her case. And when I say solved her case, I mean identified her, gave answers to her family. So the criminal investigation, that is with the police agency in charge of Daisy Mae's case. I want to get to questions and answers. Cornelia, is there anything? I'll share these slides in a PDF form and those can be shared and you can read about those other cases. If that's okay, and if you have questions about them, you can talk to us about that offline. I just wanted to say briefly that the NamUs team is a little bit bigger than myself and Cornelia. We have a lot of different specialists who are providing assistance to agencies. You can read about that when you see our slide deck. And our call to action is just to please spread the word about NamUs, help families of the missing. And Cornelia, I'll let you close out with some words that you have. And if you want to talk about the postcard, that would be great. And then you can, start us off with questions and answers. Or actually, OCPIC will facilitate that for us. But go ahead, Cornelia.
Thank you, Allison. So another thing I wanted to add that we do is, like, for instance, I'm doing free training like we're doing today, training law enforcement, tribal law enforcement, and then advocates. And so I'll give you an example as to another thing we're doing is we're working together with the FBI. They're victim witness advocates. They're putting on the Missing Persons Identification Project. It's a pilot program that they're having. And today, actually, within another hour, we're doing one in Kayenta. We did one in Tuba City, and today we're doing one in Kayenta. And what that is they have resources. They have law enforcement, they have victim witnesses, they have law enforcement from different agencies come and they have set up in the area that they're doing it. And then if a family member wants to talk to, for instance, they want an update from law enforcement from, like, let's say the Coconino County. Coconino County is going to be sitting right there, and they're able to that law enforcement agency to get any updated information. Or, like, for instance, if family members have an updated photo that they have found of missing person or the missing loved one, they can bring that to this event that we're having today, and then either we can or law enforcement can upload that photo into NamUs. So those are the things that we're working on right now, and we can do or assist with putting up an event in your area in Alaska. So that's another thing that we're also working on. So this poster I have them out if I do the table at conferences or training. That QR code, you can scan that and you're able to go to our website and then start registration if you have not registered or if you would like to register. And so that's what that is. And I guess we can go to questions. And I thank you so much for inviting us to do this webinar and inviting us to Alaska. Thank you. And there's our email address if you have any questions.
Before the questions, I am putting in the survey. So if you guys can do that, that'd be great. Before you leave, we only had 2 people do it, so please do it. I want to get at least 5. That'd be really helpful.
Thank you. I know we don't have our emojis in the webinar format, so I'm giving you all clapping and just appreciate you. Clearly, you all are a wealth of information. You have so much incredible experience in all of this work that I'm so grateful to have you working on each day. And thank you for building these relationships with us in Alaska. It's deeply meaningful to move the work forward. And we appreciate you taking the time to share with us and be in continued communication with our communities. As Tatiana mentioned, we'd really appreciate if you can fill out the survey. It's brief. It really helps support our nonprofits programming and being able to offer this kind of information. We had one question so far in the Q&A, and I hope that I satisfied that answer in writing, but if you have more that you'd like to share on that one. Someone had a question about a particular name in a case, and I did a quick look in the data that's available to me, and I understand that this case is available in NamUs already, that DPS also has it listed in theirs and in our database at Data for Indigenous Justice. If the person who sent that would like to follow up in our email, I can help see if that name can be forwarded and referred to the investigators, so the family might have a status update. But I don't know, Allison and Cornelia, if you had anything else to offer to that Q&A.
Yes, thank you again. And just thank you to everybody. Thank you not only for the invite, but thank you to everyone who listened today and is doing the incredible work that you're all doing. Yes, I saw that question, and my the biggest takeaway for me is that NamUs, is a helper agency, and we're not an investigative nor a law enforcement agency. And so you are absolutely right that everything needs to go back to the criminal investigative agency, and NamUs is always here if resources that we can provide. I certainly will look look that case up and make certain that all resources to date have been given and exhausted on our end, but I wouldn't have any, update or comments about, you know, NamUs is, has to stay in our lane of just of missing persons and unidentified and unclaimed, and leave the criminal investigations of murder to police. Um,
Thank you.
And I had one thing on I meant to say earlier on my little piece of paper when I was pulling numbers for today. I wanted to tell everyone that I looked in the database and there was 321 missing persons as of today whose last known location was Alaska. So that was just interesting, to me, to kind of, I like to, have those, like, it's not a baseline, but know what's today. And then next time we talk, like, look and just see, more data is helpful for resources. And I don't wish there to be more missing in Alaska, but the fact is we know that there are more and that they're just maybe not reported to law enforcement or somehow didn't make it to NamUs, although of note, Alaska State Troopers has everyone who is in NCIC. So if Alaska law enforcement agency has entered the case properly as missing, it's notified in your state, it's goes into your state system. Malia Miller, whose name is in the chat at the clearinghouse, as long as she sees that in the state system, it's alerted to her, she enters into NamUs. And so so I think the numbers are pretty good, but I think where we're lacking is families not reporting to law enforcement and just wanting to know those numbers. And then of the unidentified persons in NamUs for Alaska, who are marked as American Indian or Alaskan Native, there are 11 to date.
Thank you. That actually kind of rolls into the other question from Violet. Violet was asking if you've come across entries that have the race or ethnicity wrong, and when it was apparent that they were tribally affiliated. So just again, kind of that data piece really matters. We know that. And so what has that looked like for you all?
And just to clarify, did you say my computer dinged right when you were talking, unfortunately? What if someone notices that the information is incorrect, what?
Yeah, for race and ethnicity, if they're tribally affiliated, is that common or have you come across entries where that was incorrect?
Yes, definitely. It can come to us in a variety of ways. If someone notices that, go ahead and, I mean, if you're in contact with law enforcement, you can let them know, or let Malia Miller know. And then they could make the updates directly. If that's not the case, or you don't feel comfortable emailing Malia, you can email a NamUs staff member, and then we would contact Malia or the agency we have to verify all information, who they need to make sure with the family, especially that is correct. And then, because a lot of times law enforcement doesn't know that, or Malia wouldn't know without the family, of course, saying or verifying. And so we would verify that and then update it. And then it would update on our public facing website. An example Cornelia brought to me rather recently was in Colorado, there was a missing and murdered Indigenous relatives group who brought a few cases to us where there was errors or just blanks, where it was incorrect or not filled in, and they had direct contact with the families for the correct information. They brought that to NamUs, and then Cornelia worked with the law enforcement agency to approve those changes per our protocols, and then we made those changes, and then we're able to report back to Colorado's MMIR group that the changes were made so the families could know, just in case the families weren't on our website. Not every family feels comfortable, going online or can get online.
Yeah, thank you. And also just for people in the audience to know when Allison and Cornelia came up out in Chickaloon. Antonia spent some time with Malia afterwards, correcting and identifying some of our tribal members' affiliations. And so we have been working closely with both the state troopers and NamUs as best as we can to update data as we see it. And so we have been trying to be consistent on that. Yeah, so folks, if you haven't filled out the survey again, I'm going to plug it one more time. Tatiana's put it in the chat. It just takes a few minutes. And again, it really helps support us being able to do our events and these webinars. The other thing I'd like to uplift is that, DNA can be a really sensitive area for Indigenous peoples, particularly up here in Alaska, where we've had a lot of historical harm. And so I just appreciate you sharing that information about what the protocols look like and how it's used, not used. I think that was really valuable information. And then I also want to ping, there was a little bit of information about labs and things like that. We have done a previous webinar with the Alaska Crime Lab. They shared here in Alaska. And so if you all want to look at our YouTube where these recordings are posted, you can go back and watch the Alaska Crime Lab share about what processing we do here in state and what gets sent out and things like that. So if that sparked your interest, we have a webinar available on that. And then last but not least, like we know that this, and thank you for the family sharing in the Q&A in the chat, that this is a really hard topic and we want to share information and we think it's really important that we do this in a healing centered way. And so our organization partners with others to put on events. There is a 5K happening this weekend. You can join virtually. Allison and Cornelia, you can join also from afar. We have a virtual option so folks can run in memory and honor a loved one's name. You can do that in your home community. And if you're in Anchorage, you can do it in person. It's not just a 5K, we have an untimed 1 mile too, just so it's more accessible. We've had kids and strollers, we've had elders and walkers. So we try to make it as accessible as possible. But just I want to kind of end on a high note and also invite people to keep this work going and to participate in healthy ways as well and to take care of yourself and to honor the loved ones because we know that we've talked a lot about data and labs and things like that, but of course we all come together because these are loved ones that are so much missed in our families and communities, and we all come together with the shared mission of finding them and bringing them home. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the questions and answers, everyone. Again, this is recorded and we'll share it with you after. But yeah, just a little hand of clapping for Allison and Cornelia. Appreciate you both so much.
Thank you.
All so much for inviting us.
You can stop the recording.